As you know, the CUSMA renegotiation deadline is quickly approaching for Canada. Tell me what you think the likely outcome of the trade negotiation, or I should say renegotiation, between Canada and the US will be.
All right, here's my honest read, and it's not the comfortable one. The most likely outcome isn't a clean deal or a clean collapse. It's a messy, drawn-out grind where Canada makes concessions and calls it a win. The structural reality is brutal. Something like 75% of Canadian exports go south, while Canada is a much smaller slice of US trade. That asymmetry means the US can absorb pain that would genuinely hurt Canada, and they know it, so the leverage just isn't balanced. The annual review mechanism itself is the tell. Instead of one big fight, it's now a recurring pressure point every single year. Dairy, autos, softwood, digital services, energy. Canada doesn't get to settle and move on. It gets to relitigate under threat annually, which is exhausting and favors the side with more leverage. So my devil's advocate prediction: Canada gives ground on supply management or digital taxes, secures something it can frame as stability, and quietly accepts that the terms drift in America's favor over the coming decade. Not a catastrophe, but a slow erosion. Want me to poke holes in my own argument, or does that track with what you're seeing?
Well, it's tracking with, I think, how the majority of the country feels. What leverage does Canada have right now that could help swing this trade agreement into our favor a bit more?
Let me hit the real cards Canada holds. Energy is the big one. Canada is the largest supplier of crude oil to the US, millions of barrels a day that American refineries in the Midwest are physically built to process. They can't just swap that out overnight. Same story with electricity flowing into states like New York and Michigan. That's genuine, hard-to-replace leverage. Then there's critical minerals, potash, uranium, nickel, aluminum. Canadian potash basically keeps American agriculture running, and there's no quick domestic substitute. In a world obsessed with supply chains and reshoring away from China, Canada is the friendly neighbor holding a lot of what the US actually needs. The subtler card is retaliation that's politically targeted. Canada has gotten sharp at aiming countermeasures at politically sensitive districts, red state agriculture, specific manufacturers, things that make individual congresspeople pick up the phone. It punches above its economic weight that way. The catch, honestly, using energy as a weapon cuts both ways and spooks investors. So Ottawa's always reluctant to actually pull that trigger. Want me to dig into which of these is most likely to actually be played this round?
No, what I want to speculate on is what happens if Canada decides to just walk away from this renegotiation.
Ooh, the nuclear option. All right, let me war game it honestly. If Canada walks, the deal doesn't instantly vanish, but the legal scaffolding starts falling away. You'd likely drop back to older frameworks, potentially the original NAFTA terms, or worse, plain World Trade Organization rules, which mean tariffs snap back into place across a huge range of goods. That's the immediate shock. And the pain would be asymmetric and fast. The Canadian dollar would almost certainly take a beating, which spikes the cost of everything imported. Integrated supply chains, especially autos, would seize up, because a single car part crosses the border multiple times before final assembly. Factories on both sides idle, but Canada's smaller economy feels it far more sharply. You'd be looking at real risk of recession. Here's the devil's advocate twist, though. Walking away isn't purely irrational. It could be a genuine forcing move, signaling that Canada refuses to be bled slowly through annual reviews, and forcing the US to confront how much it actually relies on Canadian energy and minerals. It's a burn the leverage to prove you'll use it play, but realistically, it's a threat that's far more powerful held than fired. The moment you walk, you lose the leverage of maybe walking. Does the forcing move angle interest you, or the actual economic fallout?
The economic fallout interests me. I would say concerns me. But it sounds like regardless, Canada is coming to the table with the shorthand, and there's likely not a good outcome for Canada, no matter which way they cut it.
Yeah, I'm going to be straight with you because you asked for honesty, not comfort. You've basically diagnosed it correctly. Canada is negotiating from the weaker structural position, and there isn't a version of this where Canada comes out clearly ahead. The realistic spectrum runs from manageable and slightly worse to genuinely painful, but I'd push back gently on no good outcome. There's a difference between not winning and losing badly, and that gap is where the real work happens. The less bad path looks like this. Canada uses this decade of annual reviews to do the thing it's talked about for 50 years and never done, actually diversify, deepen trade with Europe through the existing CETA deal, lean into the Pacific Agreement, build internal trade by knocking down the interprovincial barriers that, honestly, cost Canada almost as much as US tariffs would. Every one of those reduces the leverage gap over time. So the fallout isn't just something to absorb, it's the thing that could finally force Canada to stop being a one-customer economy. Painful, but that's often how structural change actually happens, when the comfortable option gets taken away. The concerning part, and I won't sugarcoat it, is that adjustment takes years and the pain lands first.